how much do you spare and spend time with your kids daily? Because you have so much responsibility, you are working, you have 3 kids, you are taking care of family, husband, other lot of things there. So how you are
Yeah,
managing? Please
yeah.
tell me.
Oh, yes, yes. It's, to me, it's time, it's quality and quantity, right? And as you said, I am full-time working. My husband is full-time working. We have a lot of different responsibilities, and yet one of the biggest responsibilities are the children. And that quality time has always been very important to us, where the mornings and the evenings are family time. That is holy time that we are carving out to make sure that whenever we can, of course, that we enjoy having meals together where we have a moment to talk to each other. So while it may not be like the whole day or so much time, it's truly quality time, because that's time we connect. It's time we um, listen in to see what has happened in everybody's day, and that has worked out very well for us. In fact, so much so that if somebody is not there for dinner or for breakfast, it leaves a hole. It almost, is something where the other day my husband actually had an evening event, and so I had to sing the goodnight song in his voice, because he was so much so missed, because it's not our traditional routine. And I thought it was a very beautiful thing, because it is our time, and it's important. When we, even from early on, when they were so little and we would be both full-time working, I went back to work very early on, and even traveled quite a bit. So that always was important to us, and I feel that it has truly paid off. But my point of that being is that I believe, as parents, it's so much more about the quality than it is the quantity. If we're sitting there and we're not connected, or we are, I mean, personally, I'm not a big fan of any kind of devices of sorts. If our kids are preoccupied with things, it's, well, I believe we need to ask ourselves is, how much of that time are we really present with them? And so sometimes a few minutes, a few hours make a bigger difference than if we are just physically around. So yeah, that's how I see the time spent, quality over quantity.
And Raj, Marion raised a thought for me, and it's really, yes, I agree that our daughter is grown and gone now, but I think a lot of it is about mindset. That your children know in their hearts that their mom and dad really love them and care for them. So even if the mom and dad are busy and don't have a lot of time, to spend with them, the children still know my mom and dad really love me. And, maybe next, 2 days time, we can sit down and we can play a game together or whatever. That has to start first. It has to be in the parents' mindset that
Mhm.
they really love their kids, that they're, we say in the leadership world, in corporations and government, that the number one job of a leader is to create more leaders. Well, in the home, the number one job of a parent is to grow healthy, happy children, who are balanced in their approach,
Mhm.
so that they're emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, and physically balanced.
And that balance, where does it come from? I believe it's a connection, right? And
Yes.
I think sometimes we miss that point of, and there we're back with the quality, right? Are we truly connecting with each other, especially in a time where, we are on phones and we have all kinds of distractions in so many ways, that personally we are trying to keep the phones away from that quality time as much as possible, because we are not connecting, right? It doesn't help if we're sitting at the table and everybody's looking at their device. It's like, what at the end of the day really happened there? And how can we create balance children, to your point, Betska, as the next generation leaders. That happens when we truly connect in, or in the corporate world, when we sit down with our team and we listen. We understand where they're coming from. We connect the dots. We create a relationship. That's where that happens. And the same is true at home with our kids, with our partner, with the people around us. And a lot of that connection, I feel, has been lost in our society. That for me, I feel very protective within my home and within the teams that I'm managing and within the corporations I'm operating, to bring back that human touch, that human relationship, that connection. That is really where it all starts.
Yeah, so it's really, to me, it's about paying attention to your kids, right? In terms of, if they're sad, you sit down and you talk to them about their sadness. What are they sad about? If they're happy, you connect with that happiness. So it's about being, in the spiritual sense, we say, being in oneness with your child, being in oneness with your partner at home. Just really showing that you care, that you have compassion for them, that you respect them so much that you want to be there for them no matter what. Right. And moving into that place of understanding, to me, that is first and foremost,
It's, that brings up a really good point, Betska, because I could see how some people or some moms particularly might say, it's like, there's so much going on, right? How do I have the time? It's like, always I'm busy, I'm doing this, especially if I'm, working and I'm having responsibility at homes, maybe with the community. It's like, there's never, quote unquote, enough time, right? Which is personally, to me, it's sometimes goes back to our mindset and our beliefs, right? If we believe there's not enough time versus there's always enough time, there's always that time. It's a question of, what are my priorities? What do I consciously choose to pay attention to? And it's so easy when we see our kids that maybe, it's not obvious, and we're like, oh, you're okay, don't worry, right? Versus like really sitting down and taking that time and putting down whatever we've been working on that moment, whatever we've been doing, and chiming into the child and talk it through. And that has been something personally for me that probably more so this year with the pandemic, of spending more time together, where I really reevaluated, do I need to do X, Y, and Z right now? And I see my child maybe wants to talk or has something that would be worthwhile me giving them guidance right at that moment, and really putting the other thing to the side, because guess what? If it would be an emergency, all of that would be unimportant. So understanding, seeing, taking the time to address, even if it seems, quote unquote, inconvenient timing. I think that is just important.
And Marion and Raj, what also comes to my mind is the law of service, the universal law of service. The more I love and service myself, the more I can love and service others. And when we look at the children who are having difficulty in school or with alcohol, drugs, and so on, guess what? They are, and this is painful for parents to hear, but as an executive and life coach, this is the absolute truth on a spiritual level, that the children take on the patterns of their parents. They take on the beliefs of their parents. They take on the habits of their parents. So the parents have a responsibility to learn how to love themselves more. Because as they love themselves more, then they have so many more gifts to give their children. They can love and service their children better. And it's the same with leaders in the workplace. But, we're focusing on children right now. And I always said to our daughter, honey, the best gift I can give you is gifts. And one of them is I've spent hours cleaning up my negative subconscious thoughts. you know, the thoughts that I didn't love myself, that I was allowing people to abuse me, and all that stuff, all those negative things in my head. I had to get rid of those so that I wouldn't pass those patterns on to her. You see? Because kids are, through osmosis, they pick up the parents' beliefs and patterns and so on. So I am so grateful that I've worked on myself, on my subconscious mind, to move into that place of loving self and being in a place of peace. And then the other gift, I said to her, the other great gift I've given you is my meditation practice. You know, I spend hours meditating every day so that I'm constantly putting this beautiful energy around me, which the child absorbs, right? It changes their world. It changes their frequency of their life. It protects them and so on. So I know that's taking our conversation to a different level, but I'm a firm believer that the way we can service our children and love our children is to change our mindset about ourselves, change our mindset around society, and teach them not to judge others, to love others, you know, that sort of thing. So
it's really twofold when you look at it. One is, how do we take care of ourselves so we show up in our most powerful self, right? Because, and that's where mindset and limiting beliefs, and I don't think it's a once done, always done kind of thing. It's as we grow through our lives, as we are continuously developing ourselves, other limiting beliefs pop up and that we have to work through, and we're like gradually developing and growing as human beings, and that changes how we tap into tools, how we start getting really good at helping ourselves. And again, the idea is to show up powerful for those around us with beautiful energy. And it's not always perfect, but to get back to that powerful state more frequently, because when you're looking at that from a perspective of those around you, they all benefit. And then the second part that you talked about that I see is, how do we now role model and how do we guide, right? They pick up from us, they see, oh, how are we dealing with that? How are we developing and growing as adults? And really, it's not a question of age, as it is more a question of understanding how life works and how we can make the best out of life. And then role modeling and guiding others to say, you know, to have more of that awareness, that consciousness, that we can help them navigate through their challenges that they experience, depending on where in the world they are, what age they are, and what kind of situations they face. So it's really that dual, that double responsibility.
Yeah, you know, so you know what we're talking about here is the maturity of the parents.
Yes.
The emotional and spiritual, intellectual maturity of the parent. And you know, when I look around the world, because I work in so many countries, there are a lot of very mature parents. You know, they have worked on themselves, they're dedicated to their kids. And then in other places, they are not. You know, and so as parents, we have work to do.
Yeah, it's, you know, even interesting when you look at it from a perspective of what we feel is important, right? There's so much importance on educational, like university, like degrees and certain things of like we have to, or materialistic status, you know, how we are growing in those terms, if you can call it that, versus like growing as a human being, growing as a spiritual being that you don't generally learn in school or at university. You learn other things, right? But how do we then take, we're not done learning in life once we have a university degree. In fact, you know, sometimes it kind of starts at that point as we're getting into that age and we navigate our way through life. And I just this week I was talking to friends where the kids unfortunately are kind of falling off the cliff, so to speak, and they're almost lost control over them. And it's been they thought they're doing the right thing by, going to work, working hard, not really having the time for their children because they're so busy with their own lives, that at this point it's almost difficult to tap into what's even going on with the children, and they're rebellious. So it's a whole other conversation there, where how are we growing as human beings, and how are we then teaching and benefiting our children, and of course other people around us. But for the fact that we're talking about children, we have so much influence how they develop, and so much responsibility that comes with that.
I love coaching families, moms and dads and the kids, and the children can be as young as 7 years old, and to address what you're just talking about there, because the parents are becoming maybe feeling hopeless, that they don't think that they can turn the situation around, and it's making the child act out more, and so on and so forth. And that can be repaired all through mindset, all through mindset.
Or they think that, by buying the children, offering a certain lifestyle, going on vacations, buying a car when they, it's a lot of times they mean well, but it's not necessarily what the child needs or wants or craves. And so I think that's also part of a society that we live in, where really they want that time and with us. They want to feel like we're really there. And I've gotten that feedback from my children often, where they, over something very small, like picking them up somewhere from wherever, where their mom, I'm so happy that you're the one picking me up. And it makes it special. And it makes you realize how much kids really enjoy that, and how much of that connection they're craving.
And I think I've shared this story before, that because of my abusive background, where I was abused as a child, when we had our daughter, Tanya, it was my husband who was supporting her more, because I was having trouble opening my heart to my child, because I was having trouble loving her because I couldn't love myself. You see, and that's, and thank God I found this, this subconscious work, mind kinetics, that we do, and then had a very supportive husband who knew how to support our daughter and love our daughter. So, and even one day, I was out doing 60 to 80. I'm a professional speaker, right? So I was out there doing 60 to 80 gigs a year, right? Out traveling, and then I'll never forget the day when I was doing this workshop in Eastern Canada, and our daughter, who was 5 at the time, called me up and she said, "Mom, I need a new babysitter." I said, "Oh, honey, well, what's wrong with your current babysitter?" "I don't know, I just don't like her." And so we had quite a conversation. And then in the end, you know what it was? She wanted Mom to be her babysitter. She didn't want these other, different women coming in to look after her. And so John and I made a very important decision. We said, okay, Betska, I said to John, I'm taking myself off the speaker circuit for a few years here, and I'm going to be there for our daughter. I'm going to take her to school, pick her up from school, help her with her homework. I'm going to be there for her. And it was a blessing in disguise, because after that, what we did was, I had time when she was in school to do my research on human behavior. And that was the beginning of, more of my books, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a blessing. And so she told me, "Mom, I want you to be my babysitter. I don't want someone else." And I could still do my research when she was at school and so on. And I tell you, folks, that was a gift from God for her and for me.
think sometimes we also have to realize that there are times for everything, right? It doesn't mean that, sometimes like this last year, there has been more of time together or certain things that just had to be addressed. But that's not always going to stay the same. And they don't
Yeah.
always have the same needs either, nor do we have the same needs or the same situations. And I realizing that everything is temporary and really looking at it from a perspective of, things always work out somehow for us. We might not realize in that moment. And instead of stressing over what we don't get to do at that moment, to realize that most experiences, or in my opinion, all experiences, even if they're painful, are somehow a lesson learned or a blessing of some sort or a redirection or whatever it might be. So, taking that time can be a blessing, even if we don't see at that moment why it is for what it might be worth.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's, wasn't it Albert Einstein who said, we have to decide, are we living in a hostile universe or a universe that always has our best interest in mind?
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Well,